These are the most overrated tennis players. You may find your favorite player on this list, and you might even get pissed. A lot. That being said, here they are. Emma Raducanu. And first, we gotta talk about Emma Raducanu because it seems as though her entire career is at risk. See, being a former WTA world number 10 and the first British woman to win a Grand Slam singles title, since Virginia Wade in 1977, she was on top of the world and got all the attention, but things quickly changed and some tennis fans are upset with the Brit over her recent performances. Since winning the 2021 US Open, she didn't make it past the second round of the 4 Grand Slams this year, and hardly impressed at the other tournaments. Although injuries have played a part, she has underperformed massively since her US Open triumph and is at risk of dropping out of the top 80 if she doesn't improve her game. Still, it looks like she's receiving too much backlash and might have been overhyped. No doubt, she has the quality. She appears to be struggling mentally with all the pressure and recent injuries. Might be a bit too early to call her overrated. So who do we have next? Jimmy Connors. It doesn't even make sense that someone who is considered one of the best in the game is overrated. The American former world number 1 won 8 Grand Slams and stayed at the top of the rankings for 268 weeks. What's more, he holds the record for the most singles titles at 109. However, he seemed to arrive at a time when there was little competition in men's tennis, which could be why he dominated until Borg and McEnroe came. During Connors' peak, the previous great crop of players like Rosewall, Laver, Emerson, and Smith were either long in the tooth or already retired. For instance, he spanked a 39-year-old Ken Rosewall in the 1974 Wimbledon final before setting a record for the shortest ever major men's singles final with the Australian a few months later at the US Open, breezing past him 6-1, 6-love, 6-1 in 1 hour and 18 minutes and only 20 games. Connors defeated Borg, McEnroe, and even Lendl a combined 5 times in Slam finals. However, Lendl was 8 years younger and ended up winning their last 17 matches. McEnroe was 6 years younger and ended up winning 12 of their last 14 meetings, while Borg, who was 4 years younger, won their last 10 meetings. The hot-headed American had a relatively weak first serve, which made it difficult for him to compete against the bigger and stronger players of the 80s. Still, saying he is a bit overrated just sounds harsh. Not to worry, we may both agree on this next player, Gael Monfils. He's all talent, he hits miraculous shots, he's the most athletic tennis player ever. Gael Monfils is overrated. Despite being one of the most captivating players of the 21st century, he just can't win. And isn't that what the game is all about? For all his talent, the highest-ranking French tennis player hasn't reached a Slam final or even won a Masters 1000 title. Most of his 11 ATP titles are 250s, and at 36 years of age, it is unlikely that much is going to change for the former world number 6. Monfils just seems to get lost making occasional flamboyant shots and highlight reels. Of course, we all love to see the good stuff, but for a 6'4" player with a lot of power, wingspan and foot speed, his game is rather passive and defensive. We could pick out a poor mental game, lack of concentration, and discipline to bring out his very best. Is he overrated or just an underachiever? Semantics aside, what do we make of this next player, Nick Kyrgios?
I think Nick is the most talented player that I've seen in the last 10 years as far as his racket skills, and he's like a genius on the court.
McEnroe, Chris Evert, Agassi, several legends, pundits, and fans have called Nick one of the most talented players ever, a future Grand Slam champion and a colourful player with a top 5 serve of all time. He is talented, no doubt, but that is as good as it gets. Although he reached the final at Wimbledon this year, he fell to his biggest enemy again, his attitude. Just when we thought he finally had it all together after drawing first blood in the first set of the final against Djokovic, his tantrums came right off the bat after he lost the next 2 sets, and it only got worse. Most fans have argued that if he has had the right attitude, he could win a Slam, but that doesn't really make sense. It's like saying that if some random person had Nick's talent, they could win a Slam. Nick has been underachieving and is at risk of being called overrated. But remember, that could very well change if he starts winning the big titles. Margaret Court. Talking about big titles, the Aussie has more Grand Slams than anyone else. However, 11 out of her 24 Slam singles came at a time when almost all her competitors were from Australia, as the biggest names in the US and Europe couldn't make it to the tournament because of the inconveniences and expenses that came with travelling to Australia. With a smaller size draw, Court had a first round bye in every tournament. By the way, she lost to a 15-year-old Chris Everett in their first meeting, so yeah, a bit overrated, I think. Next, Elina Svitolina. The 28-year-old spouse of Monfils also finds herself here for a good reason. While the Ukrainian is capable of producing brilliant displays, she is a pusher and struggles against very aggressive opponents. Despite reaching a career-high world number 3, she has had a somewhat inconsistent career. Now on a hiatus from the sport, we hope she comes back with a big bang. Richard Gasquet. You probably would remember Gasquet's elegant backhand more than anything else. It is surely one of the most graceful. Still, the Frenchman is lacking in many other departments. A mediocre forehand and a serve and a toothless play far behind the baseline leaves him susceptible to too many attacks. Already on his 36th trip around the sun, would we be seeing one last roll of the dice? Anna Kournikova. Anna Kournikova hit the jackpot by getting all the beauty genes. An exceptional runway model, but an overrated tennis player. Apart from her early success and breaking into the WTA top 10, she never won anything of significance in her singles career. In fact, she did much better in doubles with Martina Hingis as her partner. Most of her highlights, endorsements, and press coverage revolve around her earning votes and awards for being the most beautiful, hottest, or sexiest woman, rather than her qualities as a tennis player. Something a little similar on the men's side? Grigor Dimitrov.
I don't know.
Good question. Hold on.
Dimitrov.
The 31-year-old Bulgarian and a former world number 3 dated Sharapova from 2013 and 2015, and they were the sport's power couple before parting ways. Seems like he also parted ways with his potential to win slams. Many said that he had the same skills as Federer and would remain a top 10 threat, but all that seems like distant history now. Dimitrov can beat the top 10 players on his day, but he often lacks stamina and could choke under pressure. Comparing him to Federer's astronomical standards was a bad decision. He's more likely to be remembered as the best-looking guy on tour. These next two players were overshadowed by prime Federer. Andy Roddick. Take out the big serve from his game and you get a little above average baseline play and net game. Andy Roddick got only one slam and was denied 4 times in slam finals by Federer, which could be a major reason for his underachievement. Still, Andy's game lacked variety and seemed too predictable. Who knows what could have been if he was more nuanced. Leighton Hewitt. Like Roddick, Hewitt was overshadowed by Federer. Despite his impressive never say die attitude, Hewitt's successes came at a time when tennis was probably missing an era. His flat counter-punching game was quite effective on fast courts, but when the aggressive baseliners came and the court slowed down, it became a nightmare for Hewitt, who wasn't particularly as strong as his opponents. His countless injuries didn't help either. Overall, Hewitt was a decent player, just a bit overhyped, right? Rod Laver. 2 calendar slams. What in the world? Still, the argument against him is that both calendar slams came at a time when the best players in the world were not allowed to compete in 1962 and in 1969, when they were way beyond their best years. I don't totally agree with this though. Laver won slam titles as an amateur and as a pro, and he set so many standalone records. If anything, his records may be underrated because he did them at the beginning of the modern tennis era. But just one thing is missing. The quality of tennis in that era was definitely not the best, which is why his achievements may pale in comparison to that of modern players. Boris Becker. For all his achievements as a prodigy, Boris Becker couldn't win the French Open or even a single ATP title on clay in his entire career. Even on his beloved grass courts, his heyday didn't last too long, as Pete Sampras surpassed him in no time. Notable mentions: Marat Safin, Baghdadis, Jeannie Bouchard, Caroline Wozniacki, and Tim Henman also come to mind in this discussion. Who else is missing? It is unlikely that 2 tennis fans will have the same list of overrated players in the game, so it is always going to be a perpetual argument about whose reputation is greater than it should be. But beyond all the bias and perspectives is the fact that these players have made the game more entertaining. How about those tennis players who were probably underrated? Check out this next video.